All right, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating and, honestly, a pretty radical idea from the economist Milton Friedman. It's a concept that basically flips what we think we know about science on its head. Specifically, the idea that a good theory has to be based on reality. So get this, Friedman argues that the best, most important theories are actually built on assumptions that are, and I'm quoting here, wildly inaccurate. Now that just sounds completely backward, doesn't it? I mean, we're all taught that a theory is supposed to reflect reality as closely as possible. So what on earth is he talking about? And yeah, that's the big puzzle we're going to unpack here. How can a theory that's based on something that's just plain false actually be a good one? To figure this out, we've got to follow Friedman's logic step by step. Okay, so the very first step is to get our heads around a crucial distinction Friedman makes. He thought that confusing these two things was the source of a ton of mistakes in how people think about economics. It's all about the difference between what is and what ought to be. To really get Friedman's idea, you have to see how he splits the world of economics in two. So on one hand, you've got positive economics. This is the science of what is. It's supposed to be objective, all about the data, and its whole purpose is to make predictions that we can actually test. Think of it like physics, just trying to figure out the rules of how things work. But then on the other side, you have normative economics. This is the art of what ought to be. It's about our values, our policy goals, what we think should happen. And that, of course, is totally subjective. So why does this split even matter? Well, let's look at the minimum wage debate. What Friedman points out is that most people on both sides actually share the same normative goal. They all want a living wage for everyone. The disagreement isn't really about their values, it's about competing positive predictions. One side predicts that raising the minimum wage will reduce poverty. The other predicts it'll increase unemployment. The whole argument is really about which of those predictions turns out to be right.
Okay, so if the main goal of positive economics is just to make correct predictions, well, that has massive implications for how we decide if a theory is any good. This brings us right to the core of Friedman's argument about the only test that really matters.
Friedman says economics should just stick to the classic scientific method. You know the drill. You start with a hypothesis, which is really just a simplified model of a super complex reality. From that model, you come up with specific predictions. And then, and this is the most important part, you test those predictions against what actually happens in the real world.
And here it is. This is the punchline. For Friedman, this is the whole game. It doesn't matter where the theory came from, how elegant it sounds, or how realistic its assumptions are. None of that matters. The only question is this: do its predictions actually work when you check them against the evidence?
So this brings us to what Friedman thought was the biggest, most common mistake people make when they're evaluating theories. He called it the realism trap, this habit of judging a theory based on its starting assumptions instead of its results. For ages, critics have complained that economic models are just totally unrealistic. And this famous quote from the economist Thorstein Veblen, it just nails that complaint perfectly. The idea that economics pretends humans are these perfectly rational, calculating robots, which, we all know isn't true. And so the critics say, hey, this makes the theories wrong from the very beginning.
This is a fantastic example of the two different ways of looking at it. So there was this big debate about something called marginal analysis, and critics zeroed in on the assumption. They literally went out and asked business managers, hey, do you guys actually calculate marginal costs and revenues? And of course, the managers said no. But for Friedman, that's asking the wrong question entirely. The real test is whether a theory built on that assumption can successfully predict how businesses actually behave when, say, a new tax gets introduced.
And this really gets to the heart of it. A theory, by its very nature, has to be a simplification of reality. To be useful at all, it has to ignore most of what's going on to focus on what's really important for a specific problem. So perfect realism, it's not just impossible, it's completely useless. The real question is whether the assumptions are a good enough approximation to get the job done, to make accurate predictions. To really hammer this point home and make it crystal clear, Friedman gives us this amazing metaphor that just perfectly captures his entire argument. First, he shows us just how absurd complete realism would be. Imagine a theory of the wheat market that included the eye color of every trader, their family history, the kind of soil the wheat grew on. You just have a mountain of useless details. It would explain absolutely nothing because it includes everything. A good theory, he argues, is like a map. It's an elegant, simplified tool that's designed for one specific purpose. It is not a photograph. A photograph tries to capture every single overwhelming detail of reality, just like that useless theory of the wheat market. A map, on the other hand, does something way, way smarter.
I mean, think about it. A road map is completely unrealistic. It leaves out almost everything: buildings, trees, people, you name it. But it's useful precisely because of what it leaves out. It only shows you the essential stuff you need for its purpose: navigation. We don't judge a map on how photorealistic it is. We judge it on whether it actually gets us from point A to point B. And for Friedman, a scientific theory is exactly the same. Its assumptions can be unrealistic as long as it successfully guides us to the right predictions.
And this leaves us with a really powerful question that goes way beyond economics. The next time you come across any new idea or model or theory, just ask yourself this: are you critiquing how realistic it is or how useful it is? Are you getting hung up on the photograph or are you focused on the map? It's a fundamental shift in perspective, and according to Friedman, it's the only one that really matters.